This is Gigi Berardi reading FoodWISE. I've changed my venue, and this is my new backdrop set for the near future. And I'm going to read just a little bit from FoodWISE tonight. And we started to talk about whole foods and yeasted products and bread and what is bread. And I'm going to continue with that. I'll give a reference to Stephen Jones, who directs the Agricultural Research Station in Mount Vernon of Washington State University, and also the Bread Lab. And to follow up on what I'm talking about in FoodWISE, but then I also would like to highlight what seems to me good reporting in the Seattle Times, talking about some scenarios for the coronavirus. So I'd like to point you in that direction too. All right, I'm continuing with this section in the introduction. Common foods like bread, beer, and wine require milling and/or fermentation to change the original plant material, here, grain or fruit, to the final food. The enzymes in yeast help carry out the fermentation, although some breads are made with other compounds like baking soda so that the dough rises. Technically, packaged yeast-based foods are processed, but bread yeasts are really enablers of natural processes. That's how I like to think of them. Yeasts are natural. In fact, they are all around us in the air. It is not difficult to make your own yeast microbial starter, and it is something I do regularly in cheese making, but haven't quite achieved on a regular basis, at least in my bread making. But any slurry of flour and water will attract wild yeast. But then again, you might find there is some wild yeast that aren't going to deliver the desired effect. Whole also doesn't necessarily mean raw. Cooking is usually a good kind of processing, making some foods, such as meat and legumes, more digestible. Our human digestive enzymes are just right for our omnivore diets, but we're not up to chowing down on bones like full-on carnivores. We can digest raw meat, but we get more nutrients once the process of cooking has started the nutrient breakdown for us. A simple type of food processing is crushing or cutting. Grinding changes the structure of grains, for instance, so that they can be cooked into meal or breads. But if nothing is taken away and nothing is added, the grain is still functionally whole in terms of nutrient value, even though it is no longer physically intact. Does whole mean we only get to eat what's growing in the garden now? I believe in efficiency, and for many of us, efficiency doesn't mean planting a carrot seed, watering it daily, and dusting off the dirt months later. It's certainly easier to grab a packaged snack off the supermarket shelf, but what actually goes into making that food, which we'll take up tomorrow night. Yeah, I hope you enjoy the link to the Bread Lab, which is my go-to place for information on grains and milled grains. And I'll do a vlog at some later point just on Stephen Jones and the Bread Lab. The article in the Seattle Times is definitely worth looking at, and I took a few notes here. And this article talks about the stay home, stay safe order in Washington State, which has been extended to May 4th. And it talks about what we know more about the coronavirus. That is the extent to which it's being transmitted by people without any symptoms. The idea that with the Coming of warm weather, we're going to see a decline in rates because of the warm weather they dismiss. I like how they provide different models that are pegged to the rates of infection that they're noticing in Washington state. And they're even suggesting that at a certain low rate, that the stay safe, stay home order may be rescinded or relaxed, and then initiated again once a certain threshold is reached in terms of number of cases. It's an interesting idea. And so they're presenting models to the public with varying peaks, but it looks like we may have peaked, as I had hinted at or inferred in previous videos in this series. But anyway, we have reached that peak. They talk about two important factors in terms of the control of the virus. One is test and testing, and there's talk of a self-administered test. Now, at least in our district, EMTs are allowed to administer coronavirus tests. We weren't allowed to do that before. But anyway, the testing and then also some kind of digital tracking. What they say is that South Korea, for example, had highly developed technical capabilities in terms of digital tracking, and they avoided much of the sequestering, the sheltering at home. I don't know. But I like the way in which the arguments are set up and put together in this article. So I invite you to take a look.